I drive a 2003 Dodge Neon. The headlights no longer work on low beam, so I'm replacing the multifunction switch and possibly the wiring harness that it connects into. I've got the replacement parts for both of those items. Never done it before, never worked on my car before. Here I go. First thing to do is going to be to disconnect the negative battery terminal. And I've already determined that this wrench, the C7 CRV, the crescent wrench, this end right here fits my terminal bolt. This terminal post, there's like some liquid there, so I'm not going to touch that with my bare hands. I'm thinking it might be battery acid. I'm going to wear gloves and use a paper towel as I wiggle this connector off of the post. I think I have it loose enough. Okay, so got that off. I need to keep it away from the post. I'm going to find a way so they don't touch. Probably just like that. Got some paper towel wedged in there. Okay, here we go. Now I've removed the shroud that covers the back of the steering wheel, and that's where the multifunction switch is that I need to remove. And I'm removing this shroud by going underneath the steering wheel here. Were 3 holes. That was one of the holes. That was the other hole. And the third one was there. So I loosened those screws. And now I can pop this piece cover off. And now I'm going to use torque or hex tool screwdrivers to take those 2 screws out. Now the size that fits this hole on the head of the screw is I can't get the show up here, but it's called a T120. And it fits right in here. So I've removed these 2 screws, one from this side and one from the other side of the steering wheel. Now I'm going to reach in and pull this black piece here out. And I'm going to be careful because it's connected in the back to the wiring harness, and I'll show you what I have to do there when I get to it. So I was able to unplug this side. However, on this side, it is not unplugging. It is not going to unplug because the wiring harness has shorted and melted the connector into the multifunction switch. So I've got a new wiring harness. These are 20 different wires, and it looks like I'm going to have to cut them all out and splice them with the new wiring harness into the new multifunction switch individually, each and every one of these wires. Not looking forward to this. This relay I'm going to unplug from my old switch, this rectangular thing here, and plug it into the new switch. It just plugs in like such. So I'm going to pull that out before I start cutting this wire harness out. So by undoing the 2 screws here on the left side of the multifunction switch, not the headlight side but the windshield wiper side, I undid these 2 screws that would match there, and I pulled this out, and I'm going to put this into my new switch. Here's my new switch and my old windshield wiper arm. I will slide it right into here. There's these little slits that this goes to on the side. Just like that. I'll do it again. Just like that. And that all lines up. And now I'm going to put these 2 screws back. And this is a T9 size hex tool that I'm using on these 2 screws. With that other arm removed from my multifunction switch, you can see the relay that I'm going to unplug now better. So now I can better get to it and unplug that, and I will show you how it goes right over to the next one. This is the relay I just pulled out, and here's the pattern, and I'm going to plug it back into the new switch. Let's see where it lines up. So I'll plug it in there. And now I've got it plugged into the new switch. This is my old relay. On my new switch, there's my old windshield wiper handle on my new switch. And the new switch is full. Now I've still got to get that wire harness off from where it melted on with the other half of the old switch. I'll be taking pictures of these to make sure they all go in the same spots they came out of to the new one. So this I just had to pull off with a screwdriver because it was melted on. I finally was able to remove the old multifunction switch, and this is how bad off the inside of the old wiring harness was. And now I'm going to get out as many of these wires with the tips still on them that I can salvage, and the rest I'll have to splice into where here I've got each wire numbered as to the hole that it goes into here, so that on the new connector I can put them in the right spot. So this is what it looks like after I've pulled off the old wiring harness connector, and I had to do so by breaking it to pieces with a big screwdriver and getting these all out. Some of them are not reusable, like this one. It's discolored on the wire. The connector's discolored, got some melted plastic on it still. Some of them are perfectly good to go again, like most of them actually, like these. The wire color's still good, the connector's still good, it's all good. But there's a couple, one for sure, that are going to be replaced, and we'll do that by cutting the wire and putting in a new wire. The wires on the wiring harness, the new wiring harness, are way too long, way longer than I need. So I'm cutting them back to a section that will fit in underneath the steering wheel when I'm done, to a size that will fit. And this is a group of them that I've already cut with the wire cutters. So I've cut about a difference of that much length off. And I'm going to finish cutting them all, every one of them, although I won't be using 3 of them, but I'll just take, and I'm going to use my wire. And this is how much I removed right there. I'm going to finish doing the same thing with the lavender colored wires. And now I'm stripping off wire from the end of the wires that are connected to my new wiring harness, and this is about how much of the plastic I've stripped off. This is about how much wire is exposed after stripping it, and I did so using my wire strippers, and I put the wire into the slot that is marked with the 14, because that's the one it fit into, and you close this with it laying in there, and you pull this away from the wire, and it rips off that little piece of plastic or rubber at the end. I will be connecting this tip of my wiring harness wire to the wires I'm going to cut on the old harness with this in between, and it's called a butt connector. And inside of it, on each side, there's metal. Gosh, I'm not really doing a good job at all showing that, but inside there's metal, and it only goes to the midway mark. You get that metal on both sides, and you get your sticking out wires here into a point. You twist them into a point, and then you carefully put it here to the halfway mark in the middle here, and then while holding it in place, you take your crimpers and you crimp it down. I did it in 2 spots. I crimped it right towards the middle, and then again over here. It's fairly secure. It's gonna have to be real secure. It's gonna have to be real secure. But this end that I haven't crimped yet will go on the old wires that I'm going to cut the tips off of, and I will then crimp them as well, and then wrap them with heat shrink and apply heat to shrink that, and then I'm gonna also tape them with electrical tape, good electrical tape. But the spot that I use on my little device here for crimping, if I use this for the wire stripping off the plastic, this spot with the 14, and this is where I used the wire cutting to cut the wire in half. I go way up here, and based on the color of your butt connector, I'm using blue. So I sit the wire inside the butt connector, the piece of plastic right here, hold it, and then I just crimp down, and that's how I made my crimps. So I'm going to do that to the rest of the wires now. I have finally rearranged the wires to the positions I needed them in, which includes leaving number 10 slot empty, and then all the lavender ones on top other than that 10 slot, and slot number 12 and 15 empty as well. 1 lavender down at the bottom, and the rest of the big orange ones all on the bottom. That's not how it came, and it was difficult to find out how to get those to move around because they're locked in up here. So the trick was using this mechanism on both sides to slide this inner cover off. And I did so with this tool. It's a pick tool. It comes in a pick tool pack. And I can't do it and hold the camera, but I'm trying to show you. I simply put it in here in the bottom and gently, ever so gently, raise this part, this tab up over this side tab, just slightly over, and slightly over that one, and then pull it up to about here. Same thing on the other side, and then wiggle it a little bit more from underneath with the pick tool. Got that off, and then you could see inside here, and that, so what comes off is this black thing in the middle, this line right here, this black little half cover comes all the way off. And then I was able to take the pick tool and go, see the little dents in the square holes, like it's square down here, and then kind of like a castle dent here, same on the top, little castle dent. You put your pick, once this is gone, in that castle dent little hole, and there's a little plastic part that's connected to the inside of the connector underneath the metal clip, and you ever so slightly put the pick tool in between the little metal spot and the metal and the plastic spot and the metal connectors, and then pull the wire, and boop, they all came out. It was great. And then you put this on, this little inner cover back on the same way, by you just put it into position up at the top and you slide it down. And when you get to this point, it won't slide easily, so you got to use this tool again, just like you did when you took it off, by ever so slightly getting underneath there and guiding it back down into place, and it'll snap in. Just be careful, and that works well. And I've got the ends of most of my new wire harness butt connected, and I'm going to now cut and splice some some plastic off these wires, and then hook them up to the other ends of these butt connectors in the positions that they go. Now that I've got all the wires connected to butt connectors and have the heat shrink wrap over the butt connectors, I'm going to melt that heat shrink wrap to make those airtight. And I bought these three things to do it with. A flame lighter, a 69-cent doohickey kind of hook part from the hardware store, and a clip to hold it with so when it gets hot it doesn't burn me. Here I go. I'm not happy with the result of using that torch flame lighter because it was way too strong. And let me find the spot and show you what happened. It burnt through the metal on the wire, or through the plastic, exposing the metal, so I'm going to have to put more heat shrink over that one and use a different flame. I melted all the heat shrink, and I also added electrical tape to make sure that the ends were actually airtight, and I've tucked all the wiring up there in the wire well, I guess. And now I'm going to connect the first little guy connector there on the right side, and the one I've been working on will go on the left side. And once I get it in, I'm going to close this little red tab. I'll push it forward towards me, and this is the multifunction switch I'll be putting in and plugging into those two connectors there and there, and be fastening it down right there and there with my hex bolts, and then underneath the steering wheel to replace the shroud with those 3 screws. So I took a couple pictures of a few things I wish I would have included earlier in this video, and I'm going to do so now. The first thing I did was to check the fuse that goes to the headlights, and this is the 10 amp. I believe I pulled it out. It was either 16, 17, or 18 from the fuse box that is found a little above the knee, and you can only see if you have the car door on the driver's side open. And you pull the little handle in there with your left. Yeah, you open up the fuse box by pulling it with your left hand to the left, and it's found a little above the knee, and you can only see it when you open the driver's side door. I knew this fuse was not damaged because the little V on the inside of the red part is fully healthy in color and completely intact. There's no break in it, so I knew the fuse was not the problem. That's when I started searching deeper. Another important piece of this whole thing is this little red tab on top of the connectors. There's one on each connector. I took pictures, but what happened here, you can't see the red tab, and this is actually showing you the view from the back, but up there on top of the gray connector, you see a lift, a ridge little area. That's where the connector went, and in order to get the multifunction switch out of the car to begin with the whole procedure, you have to take that red switch and push it back away from you. That disengages it from the multifunction switch. When you put it back in, or put it back on, the new wiring harness to the switch, you're going to want to push that tab forward towards you, not away from you, but towards you, and you'll hear it snap in either direction. And that was the case on the large connector and the small connector, on the 20-pin connector as well as the 6-pin connector. 6-pin connector you'll find on the right side of the switch when you open up that shroud cover, and the 20-pin is the difficult one on the left side. Just a few more pictures that I took while doing the project. This is the underside where it was melted, the hole in the bottom of the connector, not the top side where the red switch was. And by the way, I accidentally broke the switch off on the 20-pin connector before I ever got it off of the car, and it was like one of the first things I did. So it didn't break. I pushed it too hard and it went flying off. It would go right back on, but it flew off underneath the steering column, and it's still in there to this day, but I'm sure it'll be fine. But it didn't break. I should have maybe looked around with the flashlight and got it out and put it back. Well, no, I went to put it back on because that was the bad connector I was getting rid of. But that was how you would get them off and on. Lock them and unlock them. This is a picture of the new connector I had bought, and the red cap on top is in the unlock position in this case. If I wanted to lock the wires in, I would push that forward, and then they would be in there securely. And another thing to mention is this wiring kit arrived with all this extra wire, but it arrived with 10 orange wires in the connector and 10 lavender wires in the connector. The orange ones, the heavy, thicker ones, were all on top, and the lavender ones were all on bottom. But I actually needed them in the reverse, and I needed some to be empty, and I needed one of the extra lavenders to be on bottom as well. So that's why we had to get in there and take it apart. The kit I bought for the wiring harness came with that connector and those 20 wires in place like I just showed you, but it also came with an additional set of 10 orange wires and an additional set of lavender wires with all the tabs already on them, ready to go. I guess that was in case I made a mistake or maybe broke some of those connectors. It also came with this little bag of C-clamps, I guess, that I would have used had I soldered the wires into the, for splicing into the new connector from the old ones. But I didn't do any soldering, so these were useless, and I researched them a little bit and found out they would have been useless had I used them anyway. The kit also came with 20 tubes of shrink wrap to go over where I would have soldered it, but I used it to go over where I crimped it with butt connections. I took multiple pictures of the back of the old harness to be sure I knew where the wires went before I numbered the wires individually with that yellow tape. The old connector had actual numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way through 20 labeled on each hole in the back, on the slots in the back. The new one, however, did not have that labeling, so I was meticulous about matching, making sure I had it turned the right way, the same way, and each wire into the correct position when I put them into the new one. I took lots of pictures of that, and for the most part, since I couldn't get it out because it was stuck to the car for a long time, I just put the phone behind the steering wheel in as best as I could to get lots of pictures of that sequence going into the harness. And this is what those connectors looked like that were in both harnesses, and that I had to get out from the new one to move them around to the correct slots. This kind of shows a picture of how I taped up each wire with this yellow tape, and I wrote on them either T1, T2 through 10, or B11, B12, you know, whatever. Bottom, B was for bottom and T was for top, and it did come in handy. It helped me when I went to splice everything into the new harness. I wound up using all new wires to go that were in the harness and that came extra for my new wires, and butt spliced them into all the old wires instead of using the old wire connectors that I thought I was going to use, just leaving the silver part on them, on the old ones, because they were hard, like towards the silver part. The wiring had become hardened. It wasn't flexible and bendable, so that indicates it was old. It was used. They weren't fresh and new. So I used all new wires at the connection area of the new connector. And if this helps, that's the position that they go in. This is a picture that I used. I got this off the internet. You see they've got their tab in place. And in that tab is in lock position, by the way. So you would want to unlock that before you try to plug it into your... You would want to unlock that red tab before you can plug it into the multifunction switch. And then you would lock it back again once you have it plugged in. But in this picture, it is locked. I just want to say it worked. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I made this tutorial because I'm tired of being blonde and not knowing anything about my own automobiles enough to not get ripped off when I go to the mechanic. And believe me, I've got the stories every time, and it's exhausting how frustrating it can be. After searching the forums about what people who came to the conclusion that this was what was wrong with their car as well, and seeing what they had gone through and getting quotes and what those quotes were, I spent right around $100 for my parts and tools here in this project. The estimates that these people got were from $1,300 to $3,000 parts and labor from mechanics and dealerships to have the same repair done. If I did it, anybody can do it. And I figured if anybody else can do it, I can do it. And I did, and I'm so happy I did. I hope you can do yours too. This is the wiring harness and its price when I ordered it off of Amazon. It is the wiring harness repair kit, And here it's called the Dorman 645-206 pigtail connector to the multifunction switch. These are the OEM part numbers. I began my search for the parts I needed with. And the multifunction switch I was able to order through AutoZone. They didn't have it on the shelf. But the wiring harness was not located just everywhere. O'Reilly's, many places didn't have it. And so I wound up ordering that off of Amazon and got a great price. And that is SW1928. My repair was a complete success. The tools that I bought and used were a little plastic fuse puller and a little set of little crescent wrenches, a set of the hex or torque screwdriver tools. What else did I get? The wire stripper / cutter / crimper, and the butt connectors for crimping. Of course, the multifunction switch and the wiring harness repair kit. What was there anything else? I think that's about it. Very, very simple. And if they can do it, I can do it. And if I can do it, anybody can do it.